Broadcasting live from the Newsmax studio in New York City, here is Steve Malzberg.
We're not going to concede right now. We're going to investigate. Naturally, sometimes it's difficult to contest an election, obviously, but we do know that 35,000 Democrats crossed over, and we know many of those Democrats did vote in the Democratic primary just 3 weeks ago, which makes it illegal. We likewise know that we have a statute, a law in our state that says you cannot participate in a primary unless you intend to support that primary winner in the general. We're not going to concede right now. We're going to investigate.
That's Chris McDaniel, who is not conceding yet. There's a 2-point spread right now in his primary with Thad Cochran. And you know, this is the race that caught a lot of attention within the Republican Party around the states. Obviously, Cantor losing was just the shot heard around the world. But this one, too, because it was the establishment versus the conservative wing, if you will, even the Tea Party wing, if you will. Steve Deace joins us now. He's a nationally syndicated talk show host and contributor to the Washington Times. Steve joins us from Iowa. Steve, how are you?
I'm doing well, Rob. How are you?
I'm good. So here we go again with this, the talk about right and wrong in this kind of election, Tea Party versus establishment, whether or not there was some funny games played. There's always funny games played in these kind of elections. But does McDaniels have does he have a beef here in this one?
Chris McDaniel has become something more powerful, I think, now, Rob, than a candidate. He's become a symbol. And this has been a divide that has been brewing now for several years. And it's not like this is just a galvanizing moment as much as it is the straw that broke the camel's back. I can't tell you how angry my audience is, how angry my Twitter timeline has been. There's been two kinds of people in my Twitter feed the last 3 days, Rob. Leftists agreeing with the Republican establishment that I'm a racist, so that's nice. And the other is conservatives all over the country who are absolutely fed up. The dealing of the race card from the bottom of the deck against your own base. And if you look at the actual numbers, and I write about this for the Washington Times, turnout in counties that Obama got at least 2/3 of the vote in 2012 in Mississippi, turnout was up 43% in those counties statewide from the original primary 2 weeks ago. I know you've been involved enough in politics to know that kind of increase in turnout in elections only 2 weeks apart is almost inexplicable. I mean, that almost has to be contrived. And clearly, when you look at what the Barber people did, what the establishment Cochran people did, is they pulled the Alinsky-Obama race baiting tactics on the Democrat base in order to turn them out for Thad Cochran. They put out releases that said Chris McDaniel had said racist things on the radio. I've got a copy of a robocall they were running statewide that uses almost every MSNBC talking point against the Tea Party, and it's really just absolutely heinous, despicable, and I think it's a red line for a lot of conservatives. And unlike the guy in the White House, the weakling in the White House, we actually keep our red lines. I think this is going to be something that will be a day long remembered, that has long, far-reaching implications just beyond the names Thad Cochran and Chris McDaniel.
Now, Chris McDaniel has not conceded the election. I don't know how much paper ballots or anything that needs to be counted still or recanvassed. He's down by about 6,000 votes, which is the spread is 51-49. So is there any possibility that in either a recount or as they recanvass the voting booths, is there any chance he could actually pick up ground and win this thing, or no?
Well, you look at individual counties. I mean, there was one county, for example, that had 94% increase in voter turnout from the primary 2 weeks ago.
That's
94%. Yeah, what's that?
Jefferson County?
That was Jefferson County, yeah. There was the infamous Hinds County, where I think Thad Cochran got 84% of the vote. They had an over 40% turnout as well. So at the very least, I think they've already found, it looks like, hundreds of cases of potential voter fraud. I think they will find thousands of cases of voter fraud if indeed they get a chance to give this thing a proctology exam. And when you consider the point, Rob, that he essentially won Republicans on primary day by about 8 points, yeah, there may be enough voter fraud there to overturn this thing.
Well, is it similar a little bit in a different way in what happened in Virginia with Cantor's primary?
Actually, if you look at the numbers there, it's the exact opposite. I've heard people try to make that case. What happened to Eric Cantor is Republicans got rid of Eric Cantor. What happened here is Democrats kept Thad Cochran in the U.S. Senate. So they're two totally different things. In fact, if it's analogous to anything, it's probably analogous to what happened in the Virginia governor's race last year, where the establishment left Ken Cuccinelli on the side of the road The Republican Governors Association gave Cuccinelli about 1/3 of the money they gave to Bob McDonnell in 2009, who's facing all forms of ethics charges and probes nowadays. And they essentially left Cuccinelli, who they thought was too conservative, couldn't win, and who led on election night until the final 2% of precincts in largely black Democrat districts were called, and lost that race by about 2.5 points. If our viewers here don't think that the money they gave to Bob McDonnell they didn't give to Ken Cuccinelli would not have made a difference in a race decided by 2 points, they're crazy. Cuccinelli outperformed Mitt Romney in Virginia in 2013. So, if anything, I think this is a repeat offense to what we saw in Virginia with the governor's race, and what you saw in the Cantor race is how the base is responding to these betrayals.
I can tell you, Steve, you know, I ran for re-election in Westchester County last year as county executive, and we won. And the other side, the Democrats, tried all this nonsense on us. In my race for governor this year against Andrew Cuomo, we're already dealing with the race card because that's how they play early. And Al Sharpton was up to Westchester to make all the crazy accusations, and then all of a sudden a TV commercial came on statewide basically accusing me of being a racist because I'm opposed to housing and urban development coming into Westchester and trying to take over land use. So that's the card we expect from the Democrats to play because they do it so well. But in this case, what I think is so intriguing and in to some ways disgusting is to see that Republicans doing it against Republicans, and as you said, dealing from the bottom of the deck. Now, you were saying before that there might be some shenanigans with regard to voter fraud. Now, in what way?
Well, to me, first of all, it's fraudulent in intent when you whip up people to vote as if it's a general election. If you look at the messaging that was sent, they're trying to deny you your right to vote. I mean, these parties are private associations, and these are primaries among private associations. So that's a fraudulent intent in terms of the scheme. But when you're having people that may not be eligible to vote, when you are getting them to vote under false pretenses and false charges, if that's not fraud, Rob, I mean, I don't know what it is. And I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of the race card from the Republicans. You know, it's one thing, most of the American people are not watching a lot of liberal media. You know, you and I with what we do, we get to see what actual ratings are. And there's not a lot of people consuming a lot of mainstream media outside of really self-loathing Republicans who just can't seem to get enough of it. But when your own side uses their talking points against you, can you just see now? A Ted Cruz or a Rand Paul or any of these other beloved wacko birds, Senator, you align yourself with the Tea Party, and even your own establishment says the Tea Party's racist. So are you a racist, sir? I mean, they've essentially given credence to this race baiting. And it's one thing when the guy's not in your uniform try to score points against you. It's another thing when the guy wearing your uniform takes the ball, dribbles down to your end of the court, and shoots the ball into the basket for the other team. And that's exactly what happened there.
You wrote a book, Rules for Patriots, How Conservatives Can Win Again. So how can conservatives win again nationwide when we're going up against, well, we're going upstream, if you will, against the media, against the popular culture, if you will, sometimes, against the machine that can spit out a lot of bad stuff, as Mississippians now see. So how do conservatives keep their principles and grow? Because one thing that I think is good about what happened in Mississippi, I do believe that Republicans should be going to areas where Republicans traditionally have not gone. So if Jefferson County, for instance, is an area that is traditionally African American and overwhelmingly Democrat, for instance, then Republicans do need to wander in there, not with just a toe, but with their entire body, and make the case that Republican or conservative principles is good for everybody, and that's how we advance. So how can Republicans or conservatives go to Hispanic areas and to African American areas and immigrant areas and build a party? Because you win by adding, not subtracting.
Absolutely. Well, if the first thing, you can't win with just your base, but you can't win without your base either. So consistently betraying your base and then essentially expecting them to just be there for you no matter what you do to them, whatever heinous offense you commit against them, that is a certain way to subtract your party. And you're watching the Republican Party establishment do that now. You mentioned minority outreach. I completely agree with you. But I think the way you do it is what Rand Paul does when he goes to speak at historically black colleges with his worldview. This is what the Tea Party is doing, where they're trying to win people on the issues. And that's the one movement in our party that is actually bringing in minorities, and not just as supporters, but even as actual candidates that are are running for office. What the establishment did in Mississippi, Rob, is they race baited. You know, we finally found out, after all these years of conservatives like me going all the way back to Jack Kemp, begging the party leadership to try and rally minorities to universal American principles, and they absolutely shunned us, told us, hey, these people will never vote for us, we're just going to waste our time. Well, we finally found out they can organize a minority voter outreach when they want by using race baiting tactics. And my fear actually is by utilizing these tactics and providing credence to them, they just made the jobs of a lot of Tea Party candidates, the Mia Loves, the Tim Scotts, the Alan Wests, the Dan Bonginos, and the others that we've seen around the country. They just made their jobs a lot harder because they fed into that stereotype. And that's why you mentioned my book, the first of the 10 commandments of political warfare. Never, ever, ever trust Republicrats, which are not rhinos.
That's right.
I mean, those are people who are really, who pretend to be Republicans using our talking points to get elected all over the country, but then they stab us in the back time and time again, like what you just saw the Barbers and Thad Cochran's operation do to us in Mississippi.
Steve, thank you very much. We look forward to hearing from you again. Folks, up next, it's the best of Give Me 5 on the Steve Malzberg Show. Don't go anywhere.